Hello again, everybody. This is Steve coming back to you, picking up where we left off at last time. Um, this time I'm going to explain the Oort perimeter, and it's one of numerous perimeters that have existed in Earthfleet history since the beginning. I haven't really had a need to go back and explore where this all came from yet. So this is what I have is all that's in canon right now. Eventually, though, either in the next book of Earthfleet, following the timeline of First Dawn, with the early fleet, the Society Space Corps, etc., etc. I'm looking at an idea to kind of explain where the perimeter idea came from, where it came from, what its predecessors were, how they built it, things like that. Kind of, not just what is it, but where did it come from. So, but again, that part's not in canon yet. But what is in canon is the 7 perimeters of soul space, and I say 7 because there was 2 initially, and then there's 5 later on. And I say 5 later on, coming to 7 because the first 2 are cannibalized to make the next 5. But I'll explain that in a second. Anyways, the Oort perimeter is an ultramassive, multi-layered, gridded defensive shield system. If you remember my description of gridded shielding from before, that's what this is. But instead of individual grids that all operate on their own, these all blend together to create a single monolithic shield. So it's gridded shielding that operates like monolithic. The Oort perimeter itself, when Earthfleet and the Society decided to build it, they decided, let's go big. And like when I say big, I'm talking really, really freaking big. At one point in time, I had the, on the previous wiki before it went bye-bye, I had all the numbers figured out. I should probably go back and redo those numbers just so you can have them and look at for those of you that are number nerds. But basically, the perimeter itself is ultramassive in the sense that it extends out from the sun to the area where the theoretical Oort cloud is. So it's that far out. It's basically designed to contain the entirety of soul space and the solar system and the surrounding planets and asteroid belts, the Kuiper belt, the Oort belt, stuff like that. And it's called the Oort perimeter because it lives out in the area where the Oort perimeter or where the Oort belt should be. In this universe, the Oort belt doesn't exist. Now you have to remember too that Earthfleet takes place in a different dimension that's similar to ours. If you've ever read like DC and Marvel comics, I think it's in the DC universe with Superman and those guys like that, where they have the multiple different Earths and history played out differently in each of those different dimensions and stuff. Well, kind of the same idea here, and you see that explored a bit in Dark Earth, where Earth isn't the only dimension Earth's dimension isn't the only dimension with an Earth in it. There are a couple dozen others, of which 5 are known for sure to exist. Our dimension is one. The dimension that contains Earthfleet's a different one, and so on and so forth. But anyways, in their dimension, the Oort cloud doesn't exist. It's theorized just like it is in ours, but they get out there and they find out, it doesn't actually exist. We thought this was an actual cloud where comets and stuff came from, and you find out it's just it's a heliopause of sorts, because you have the regular heliopause, and then you have another couple different heliopauses further out, where the galactic gases and energies and particle streams and stuff like that all kind of bunch up like you coming up against a wind barrier or something like that. And so what they did was they realized, okay, that doesn't exist out there, but it is a perfect place to build a defensive shield. The idea being it keeps the enemy as far away from Earth as possible. And the way I'm imagining its creation, like I say, this isn't canon yet, because I haven't written about it, I haven't canonized it yet, but I'm thinking that it would be For early Earthfleet and society, given their limited resources, they're probably going to build just a shield around Earth. And that's going to work to begin with. That'll be just fine. But then they're going to realize, well, that doesn't really work because it's got this problem, it's got that problem and stuff. And then as they grow and they start, they start developing AIs that they can automate their production. They start mining the outer planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. They mine Mars. They're able to milk Mercury and Jupiter for, Mercury and Venus for stuff. And the funny thing about Mercury is you need metal, go to Mercury. Mercury has butt tons of metal. I mean, that place is just an absolute gold mine, figuratively speaking, for metals. They're radioactive, but they're metals. They're usable metals. And the society would have the technology to take away the radioactive state of, take all the radiation out of it, all the radioactive particles and everything, so that it's just normal iron, steel, lead, or iron, lead, copper, and so on like that. And they would, so they would have been mining Mercury. They would have been going after Venus. Anywhere in the galaxy or anywhere in the solar system, they could get usable materials. Like hydrocarbons would be good for out of Uranus and Neptune. Hydrogen particles would be good for, also good for deuterium and antideuterium. Because originally the fleet was run by warp power. They didn't start moving to coaxial power until around the time of the Sergenius. The Sergenius was the first coaxial powered starship. Then they started converting, once they realized, hey, this is a really great technology, let's start shifting some of our other ships over to it. And they were phasing out warp drive and bringing in coaxial drive and coaxial power and things like that. So 1950s, 1960s would be about the time that they were starting to shift away from warp power over to the newer energy technology. And they had like the vacuum energy generators back in the time of Edmund and the Destiny. It's just that, that was not a technology that they could scale very well. Whereas warp drive, or the warp core, the warp power core system, they could scale that pretty well. Coaxial, they could scale it pretty well. They did eventually, for the Raven and Wolf Pack, they figured out how to scale that vacuum energy reactor, turned it into a quantum energy reactor, and that became the power core for the newer starships, which is a lot safer and more stable than even coaxial drive is. So, but anyways, going back to the perimeter, it was around that same time, that coaxial drive was coming in, that they originally this was powered by, the satellites were powered by, I think, like warp power, and they had vacuum energy, fusion reactors, a variety of different power sources. And they were trying them all. They were kind of throwing them out there, see which one worked best, which one worked at scale. Did they have problems with like harmonics that this created that they didn't want, so on and so forth. And there was even several versions of the Oort perimeter itself, because the Oort perimeter went through a number of upgrades over time. The perimeter stayed, but the satellites kept being upgraded. And anyways, they initially built this as a way to keep everybody not just at arm's length, but like, 100-foot pole with a spear point on the end of it to make sure nobody got too close to Earth. So they really went all out with this, really just poured everything into it to get this put in place. Behind that is a second perimeter called the Kuiper perimeter. It's similar to the Oort perimeter, but it's small, and it's located just inside the Kuiper belt, which is just beyond Pluto. So it kind of sits between the orbit of Pluto and the Kuiper belt. And in that universe, the Kuiper belt does exist. It's not as dense as what we theorize it to be, but it does exist. Like I say, it stays far enough out from Pluto that it's never a problem. And one of the other interesting things is, because of the way security works in soul space, they want to interact with other races, other species, stuff like that. Well, what they did to make that possible and make it easier is they designated one of the gates, which was Gate 27, to be the primary transit point in and out of soul space, because then what they had near Gate 27, just above the Kuiper perimeter, and when I say just above, we're talking galactic distances, so several thousand miles, but that's like, in galactic terms, that's kind of floating right just above the surface. You have Pluto Station. Pluto Station is it's kind of the halfway point between coming to Earth to meet the Society and going out to the galaxy and meeting them there. It's where the galaxy and the people of Earth and soul space can come together and meet. It's got meeting rooms. It's got promenade with markets. You've got like here, this example. You've got shops. You've got eateries. You've got aliens from all across the galaxy who are, like I said, they meet there to do business. It's neutral territory, and it's still in soul space, but it's classified as neutral territory. And everybody who comes in there is told that this is neutral space. If you have a rivalry with somebody else, take it outside. Take it outside soul space. Not, go ahead and throw hands and then come back when you're done. So, but while you're here, it is, you must obey a continuous state of peace, because, like I say, it's neutral space. The station itself is essentially just a gigantic flying saucer. The promenade is a large part of it. They've got, like I say, meeting rooms. You have the command tower. You've got at the core of it is all the engineering that keeps this thing working. And it's it's a gigantic meeting place for aliens of all types. And one of the other things too is it becomes a favorite place for a lot of races. Traders come through there. They do trading. They do negotiations there. One of the big places that's well known in the region, and just a lot of people come out there just for that, just to visit that place, is Grog's Tavern. And Grog, let's see. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, Grog's Tavern. This is basically a meeting place for every type of alien possible. Now, it's a Class M atmosphere, which Earth is Class M. So if you're Class M, you can wander in, you can sit down, have a beer, have an ale. It's essentially, if you look at the bar, it's not like you would think of a normal bar or a pub or tavern in a regular brick and mortar location. This thing is basically a storage room with bar stalls and stuff. Or bar stools, excuse me. Bar stools, drinking tables, stuff like that. And there's a lot of different races. And if you notice, a lot of races in the galaxy are based off of animals. And there's a logic behind that, because the humans are the only species on the planet that look like we do. But then you also have, you have orangutans, which are kind of similar, but not really. You have wolves, foxes, cats, dogs, fish, birds, stuff like that. So you're going to see a lot of this kind of stuff in this bar. And why this is the case is explained in Dark Earth. I won't spoil it for you, but it explains through Phylan's side of things, through the political side of things, why this is, why all these races exist, and Earth is involved in part of that, but I won't spoil that part for you. Anyways, the primary bartender is this great. Whoops, there we go. Is this great big guy? He's a Machinorian, and yes, that is a pun, because the arms look like noodles, so macaroni, so Machinorian. Anyways, that was the intended pun. I don't know if it came off like that, but he's a bartender. He sits there and he uses his tentacles to, because he's a gigantic octopus, a sentient octopus, and he uses his arms to mix drinks. He can sit there and mix 4, 5, 6 drinks at the same time and keep them all straight, and he can, while holding a conversation with you and keeping an eye on the room and stuff. And what's funny is the reason he's called Grog is, as you can see right here, his name is a nod to Johnny Hart's famous beloved comic character, Grog, from the BC comic strip. Now, I didn't directly steal it from him. I did that as a nod. It's not like, oh, I'm going to copy who Grog is. No, it was a nod. It's the nickname that the fleet people gave to him because of the way he talks. He talks and sounds just like Grog. It would be like if you walked around sounding like Winnie the Pooh, somebody might call you Pooh. It's the same idea. So, it's not his official name. It's his nickname that everybody knows him by. They know him. They know his bar. They know the drinks he has. He serves a drink called Targaryen Boot Kicker. That, you take a shot of this stuff, and if it doesn't put you on the floor, you got yourself one heck of a constitution, because that is a strong drink. I mean, that just sucked the wind right out of you. So, and it's kind of like whiskey, brandy. The flavor is kind of like 5 or 6 different drinks or alcoholic beverages mixed together. It's really powerful, but it's a favorite. People just love it. But yeah, anyways, that's Pluto Station. Now, let's see. Yeah, okay. Anyways, due to the events of the Ort Perimeter and the Battle of the Ort Perimeter, which I'm not gonna spoil you guys on those. But let's just say this much: that that battle, the Battle of the Ort Perimeter, revealed a key weakness in that shield. Basically, that shield is too big. They went big because they wanted to make sure Earth was absolutely positively protected and everything that was ours was shielded. Well, that backfired. Backfired in a rather spectacular way. Anyways, after the events of Ort Perimeter, the fleet went in because they were in the process of doing upgrading, and they were down to just Gate 27, an immediate area around it that needed to be upgraded, which ended up becoming the Achilles heel of the shield of that area. And that why that is explained in the book. I won't go into it, but that shield failed at a key important time, and it failed in a rather bad way. So what they ended up doing was Mike sicked Bentley on this, and let's see here. Oh, come on, you. There we go. There he is. This guy, like I say, he's a doctor just like Ohm and Corbin and all the other scientists that you meet in the series. But he doesn't carry a title in his name like Dr. Bentley. Bentley's not his first name. Bentley's his last name. That's what everybody knows him as. I never gave him a first name because there was no real need. Because when you're running around a bunch of scientists, everybody's going to be addressing each other by their last name. So Dr. Bentley, Dr. Corbin. Well, Bentley wouldn't be Dr. Bentley, but it would be Corbin and Ohm and different ones like that. So you're going to be like Dr. Ohm, Dr. Corbin, etc. But he is Bentley is a doctor too, but he specializes in production. So he's the guy who, somebody over here makes the product. They invent the product. Here's this cool little gizmo. We need this mass produced. They go to Bentley. Bentley goes, okay, how does this work? How does it function? How do you put it together, etc. like that. He figures out how this thing works, takes all their notes. How is it built? What does it do? And then he figures out ways to produce it, and not just produce copies of it, but mass produce copies of it. In other words, he's able to sit there and tell the machine, here's the materials you need, here's how they need to go together, go for it. And the machine just spits these copies out like crazy. So where other scientists focus on creating and inventing and discovering, he's the one that figures out how to mass produce them. And it's him and some others that are responsible for the mass production of the shield satellites that make up the Oort and Kuiper perimeters. Yay, dry throat again. Anyways, he's the one that figures those out. Then you have, let's see, Dr. Corbin. This guy is the chief director in Oort Perimeter. He is, to be nice, he's a prick. He's not like a hyper Karen, he's just a jerk. An extremely smart jerk, but he's still a jerk. And he's the head scientist at the time when the Oort perimeter fails, and it was partially his designs that led to that. So if you want to sit there and go, boo, this is the guy you want to do that to. Because Bentley just took what Corbin gave him, and Corbin and the other scientists gave him, and mass-produced it. He wasn't looking to see... Well, basically, he wasn't QA. He was just the guy that had to take what they built and make more copies of it. So... But anyways, like I say, that perimeter failed during the Battle of the Oort perimeter. Almost cost Earthfleet their entire fleet, because it allowed the Varnock Black Fleet inside the shield, and Earthfleet wiped out. Well, they came in with 2 armadas, so 5,000 ships. Earthfleet killed about 2,000 of their ships, so about 3/4 of the first armada. So let's see, 2,500, 3/4. I'll let you guys math that one. But anyways, it was about 3/4 of the Varnock Black Fleet. But Earthfleet lost half of its fleet doing that. So if the battle had been allowed to continue on, which they were miraculously saved by that point in time, and that sounds like a spoiler, and it kind of is. Who does it and how, though, that's a different story. That one you have to find out by reading the book, because I'm not telling. It's another case of not what happened, but how did we get there. But anyways, after the end of that, and they realized, okay, this shield is actually, in its current state, is more a liability than an asset, especially considering the weaknesses that they found in the shield and the problems it was causing because of its sheer size. They took that. Let me back up here to this. There we go. What they found from that, they realized, okay, the new shield satellites, the upgraded satellites, they're great, but the shield is just too big. It's too big, and it's causing a problem because of its sheer size and surface area. So what Bentley does, he goes out there, and he takes the... Bentley's in charge of production, but at the same time, he helps out with some of these bigger projects like this, because sometimes production doesn't necessarily mean manufacturing. Sometimes it's how do I take something that somebody else has already made and reconfigure it or change it around, make it better. So like, you give me the hammer, how best do I use it? That kind of idea. So what he did was he worked with a bunch of others, and they took the Oort perimeter, and when I say what's left of it, I'm talking like, 99.9999975% of it was just fine. It was that one hole that got blown in the shield that was the problem. But anyways, they took that shield and they disassembled it layer by layer, brought it through the Kuiper perimeter. They opened up the gates in the Kuiper perimeter, brought it through, or brought those shield nodes through, and set them up on the backside of the Kuiper perimeter to create the Sol perimeter. Then behind that one was the Pluto perimeter. And the fun part is the Pluto station ended up between the Sol and Pluto perimeters. And the Pluto perimeter is just outside of the orbit of Pluto. So, Pluto's not going to hit it, but it's going to swing up pretty close, on a galactic scale. It's going to kind of come by, just barely miss it, and come back down. Which, barely missing it when you're talking in, galactic measurements and distances and stuff, could be 1,000 miles, could be 2,000 miles. So it's still a safe distance, but it's going to come up real close to it. And if that ever became a problem, they could adjust the orbit of Pluto so that it had a greater distance from that perimeter, or they could actually expand the perimeter and fill in the spaces to allow it to continue to operate but not be quite as close to Pluto. And the Sol perimeter basically sits roughly where the Kuiper perimeter was. Once the Sol perimeter was in place, they brought in the more of those satellites and then formed the Pluto perimeter. Then they would have, with those two in place, they would have torn down the rest of the Kuiper and Oort perimeters, brought them inside, and then there's 3 other perimeters besides that, including Jupiter perimeter, Mars perimeter, and Earth perimeter. So basically they went from 2 layers of defense to 5. The inner 3 are never turned on unless there is an emergency, and Earth needs that extra layer of defense. Otherwise, to ease travel throughout the solar system, those are turned off normally. They are out there. People know where they're at, but those tend to be off and kind of like bunched up so that they're easier to navigate through. And then when the perimeters are activated, they spread out into their normal positions and activate and layer up the shield and stuff like that. So there's a lot of mechanics that go into that, how that works. But anyways, it goes from 2 to 5, and they don't really have to add that many shield satellites to it because there's enough of them in the Oort and Kuiper perimeters to create all of those shields and either come up just a little short or have a little bit of extra. And of course, Pluto Station goes inside the new Sol perimeter between Sol and Pluto perimeters. But it continues doing its thing. And they do find that when they change the size, and that's the funny part, is when I remember my original calculations, between the Kuiper perimeter and the Oort perimeter, the surface area difference was, I think, 4.1 to 1. So Oort perimeter had 4.1 times more surface area than Kuiper did. And once they closed down the Oort perimeter, they noticed that the Kuiper perimeter did not have the problems the Oort perimeter did, because it had a considerably smaller footprint. It was 25% of what Oort was. And that smaller footprint allowed the shield to properly deal with the things that allowed Kuiper and then later Sol perimeter to deal with the things that Oort couldn't deal with because of its sheer massive size and the amount of energy that was flowing across it, the amount of energy that was coming in, hitting it from the outside of the galaxy. It was just basically too much surface area and too much energy for the shield to properly deal with it. But like I say, though, you do eventually see Jupiter, Mars, and Earth shield used. That are used briefly during Book 4, Empire Rising. But generally, you won't see them activated. Sol and Pluto are the primary ones after Oort and Kuiper are decommissioned that do the rest of the job. I am working on some future novels which goes well beyond Dark Earth and the time of Pendleton as Grand Admiral. And it goes into a whole different era. And I haven't decided if those perimeters are going to be needed anymore, because once Earthfleet gets strong enough, they won't need those. Because the one reason that these even came into existence is all they needed was manufacturing capacity. They did not need manpower, and manpower is always the problem with Earthfleet. They're always short on manpower. So if they could put these out there, have them be completely automated, managed by AIs. Completely remote controlled, where you had little to no personnel having to actually interact with them to keep them running. Perfect. And so that's why this was more practical to them, because they couldn't build enough ships and man enough ships to properly defend Sol space. But the satellites were a lot easier prospect. They were easier to manufacture. They created a shield barrier that would you could roll up to there with a couple of armadas and just sit there and hammer on one spot all day long, and it's not going to breach. And say you find a way that you can breach one shield, no problem. You still got you got the primary shield and 4 other layers below it, and nothing says that you can't also take one of the lower layers and push it up, form it into the outer shield, and then bring some replacements in behind it to replace that hole in the 5th layer, and the shield's back to whole again. So you're back to square one, even if you do punch a hole in it. In other words, you're not going to get anywhere. So, anyways, that is the Oort perimeter. I've actually got about 15 more minutes I could work with stuff, but this one I think I'm going to cut a little short because I keep running you guys up to about 45 minutes because I'm over here blah, 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 just constantly talking. But, yeah, anyways, that's the defensive system that goes around Earth. That was thought up sometime around early 19th century. Or not early 19th century, excuse me. Early 1900s, early 20th century, basically. And it was... But this is before the ship killers ever became a thing. This is when they were still working with, big battleships and cruisers and stuff like that. Because a lot of the ships that Earthfleet had in their early days were modeled after Geek Von designs. And Geek Von designs are good, but they also tend to be very Spartan, because the Geek Von are practicalists. They don't go for bling. They go for what works best. And if it's ugly, fine. But if it does the job and it works, that's what they do. If you look at their ship designs are very boxy, very utilitarian, not a lot of aesthetics, very Spartan on the inside. The crew have basic crew comforts, but they're not all that special as far as the internal and external. And of course, Earth is going to be like, well, we're going to, maybe shine the brass and, may add some nice lighting and stuff. So they'll make it comfortable for their crews, but they're still going to follow the basic principles of what the Geek Von have, because that was their role model for what they built. Later on, though, like the Sergenius was their first real break away from that design doctrine to something entirely unique. And then as time goes along, they still kind of hold to the practices of the Geek Von, but then these ships are made uniquely Earth. And like I say, you see that with later designs, that some things carry over, other stuff is very unique to Earth. And it produces kind of an interesting mix, but it works for Earth. But anyways, like I say, I'm out of content for this one. And we're already at 31 and a half minutes. So I'll call this one, and we'll start into something next time. I've covered a lot of the basics of the universe at this point in time. So I think on my next video, I'm going to go over and cover one of the other universes. And we'll start down on that one. We'll come back to this one, because there's a lot of other technology. Like there's the transporters, there's just gob tons of cool technology. Like I say, I got to get pictures of the colonies and what they look like, so you get a better idea of those, kind of how the colonies work. And there's just a ton to know about this. I might go through and introduce various characters, who they are, what their personalities are like, so forth and so on, to kind of give you a deeper introduction into the Earthfleet universe. So until next time, I'll see you all. I'll see you all next time, and stay tuned, because I got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. You gotta remember, I got 25 different books and a wiki that's over 800 pages. So there's a lot to talk about, and this stuff should keep you interested for years. And if you want to learn more, you could read the wiki. If you want to see how it was applied in the books, read the books. I'm not going to sit here and shove the books down your throats and say, buy my books and read them. No, I look at it this way. I will put out the I can't call it a carrot and stick, because that feels almost deceptive. Let's use this one. That I can lead you to water, but I can't make you drink. In other words, I can encourage you to read the books, but that's up to you. I'm gonna, but I will at least give you overviews on the universe of Earthfleet, the characters, the races, personalities, what each one's like, and so on and so forth. So anyhow, talk to y'all later.